Hey everybody, welcome back to SHREWSWORTHY. I am your host, Ben Shrewsbury. This show is being recorded much earlier in the morning than it usually is, but I kind of like it that way. My guest today is a comedian. He's got a big comedy special coming up next week. Well, yeah, it's going to be next week as you see this at the Icebox in Lincoln, correct?
Yes, Lincoln, Nebraska.
And that's going to be a big show. Loch 22 is going to be there covering all of it. It's Doc Peterson. Doc, how you doing, brother?
Good, man. Good morning.
Good morning. So let's kind of go back to your start in comedy. How did you get started in this crazy business? And don't tell me it's not crazy. I know enough comedians to know it's crazier than a hothouse rat.
It is absolutely crazy. There is no lying and bullshitting that whatsoever. I got my start in comedy because I was going to support a friend of mine that was hosting an open mic night. And I didn't even know that he was into comedy at the time. So it was kind of a surprise that this was a thing. And I was dragging my wife along to all these shows, and the comedy was horrible. Let's be honest. It was the worst shit you've ever heard in your life. And the bar that was hosting this open mic night, the people were not there for the comedy. So they would turn their backs on the comedians. They would go and plug in the jukebox and throw money in it and crank it up just to drown out the comedians. It was rough. It was very, very
I'm
rough.
sure these guys walking off stage just looked like the most dejected human beings you've ever
Oh,
seen.
the worst ever. It's like it's worse than a little kid that got their balloon popped. They just drug their hands with their head down and were like, why is this so bad? But it's a case of the wrong place, wrong time, wrong everything. And one day my wife looks at me and she goes, look, I love supporting your buddies out here, but this sucks. I can't do this anymore. You're gonna have to up my bar tab or I'm out the door. And I said, well, what if I do 5 minutes next week? And she's like, you're gonna get up on stage and you're gonna tell jokes. And I said, sure, why not? And so to and from work for the next week, I practiced a 5 minute set until I had it down. I made outlines of stuff that I had thought was funny that happened in my life and that kind of thing. And the next week, as it turned out, it happened to be held at a different bar. Way better atmosphere, way more conducive to comedy, way more everything. So I got up and I did 5 minutes. And when I got off stage, the owner of the bar says, hey, we have a comedy competition coming up next weekend, and one of our comics dropped out. Would you mind filling in the spot? I just came off stage. I was 10 foot tall and bulletproof at that time. So I went, hell yeah, I'll do a comedy competition. Like,
Your ego
second
just
time.
on cloud nine.
Yeah. I'm like this, man. I couldn't get through the door to get out of the bar at the end of the night. And so my second time on stage ever was a comedy competition. That night, what they didn't tell me was I needed 10 minutes and not five. So like 4 days before the show, I'm cramming 5 more minutes of shit into my act. I got second that night. But the crazier part is they chose the top three guys to come back and do a 5 minute encore. Shit, I barely had 10 minutes, much less an additional five. So I kind of ad libbed and made it through some stuff that I had made notes about. Luckily for me, one of the other comics got really stoned in the parking lot before they had to go up and do their encore. So he just bombed that part. And I lost to a dude with like 15 years experience. So I didn't feel too bad walking out with second place that night.
And you had all of 5 minutes,
Ah,
quite literally. You didn't
yeah,
have one night, you had 5 minutes in a random bar.
yeah.
So how many years ago was that? How long did it take us to go from that to Trust Me, I'm a Doctor on July 15th?
3 years. three
So,
years.
so you've done this pretty quick.
Yeah. It's not the typical trajectory that you see in comedy or even in the local scene. And part of that is I'm not a believer in doing the same shit that everybody else has done for the same however many years and getting the same results. There's so many people out there that have been in the comedy scheme and scene for 5, 10, 15 years in the local area, but they're doing the exact same thing that they were doing 10 years ago. And that's not the way I live my life. If I'm not doing 110 miles an hour with my ass on fire, I'm not having a good time. So I'm not going to just grind it out and do shitty open mics for the rest of my life. I'm either going to go forward or I'm going to say I did this, I experienced it, and I'm moving on.
That's kind of how I've done this show. I'm either going to do this 110 miles an hour and my ass is going to be on fire, or this show's going to be over in 6 weeks and it's going to suck. I
Yeah. Like,
and nobody's going to remember it in 3 days, and everybody's going to be like, "Oh, that show ended." Okay,
and it's done. Yep. Exactly.
who the fuck was that guy? Uh, oh, he hosts a wrestling show and an interview show. Who the fuck is this guy? And they'll be more confused as to why I existed in the first place than anything else. So your comedy is very much story buildup, and I talked to you about that before the show, and you say that's natural, which I have to assume it is. Who are your inspirations in terms of comedy?
So, just like my path in comedy was non-traditional, I would say um, I didn't grow up thinking I was going to be an entertainer or that I was going to be a comedian or anything like that. So I watched comedians when I was young, but I never looked at any of them and said, I want to do that or I want to be that person. Um, so I even hate to say this name on air, but like Bill Cosby, when he did that special from what is it, the early 80s where he was wearing the brown suit and he sat on a chair in front of a sold out arena just holding a microphone and did 2 hours of storytelling comedy. That was something that I enjoyed as a kid, and I even watched it with my parents and that kind of stuff. Um, so I guess that was probably my first taste into that storytelling idea of comedy. But more recently, of course, I watched Andrew Dice Clay when my parents weren't around, and Sam Kinison or George Carlin when they weren't watching and monitoring what I had on the TV. More recently, like Burt Kreischer and Tom Segura, a couple of the biggest names touring in comedy today, and both of those guys are storytellers.
And
I
neither one
didn't
of them came up conventionally either.
know exactly, and Burt is the king of self promotion and understanding how to connect to people and fans and all of that. And the best thing that I like about both of those guys is that you couldn't steal his jokes. You couldn't do a Burt Kreischer story on stage in Lincoln, Nebraska, and not have everybody in the audience go, "You stole that. That isn't yours. You didn't write that." Versus a lot of the shit that I see out there right now, you know, I, I have a list of comics that I won't hire locally because I've seen their jokes done on TikTok in some form or fashion. Like, you didn't do something original. You took a joke that we told on the playground in sixth grade and rewrote it to say Jimmy and Tommy instead of Jane and Sue, and now you're calling it your own damn joke. So storytelling allows me to have completely original material that no one else can ever touch.
Of what I know about the comedy business, there's a lot of people ripping other people's stuff off.
Of
And
course.
it's a dirty business a lot of the time, especially on the West Coast. And Burt Kreischer has said that in interviews. He's like, dude, this is not a clean business by any stretch of the imagination. And anybody that tells you it is lying to you.
It's dirty in so many ways. They will try to steal your jokes. They will try to steal your gigs. They will contact promoters using your name and go, "Hey, I know Doc Peterson. How about I sneak in here and maybe host a show or two or produce a show or two?" And I'm like, "What the hell are you doing?"
Who
You
the
know,
hell are you?
yeah, I've hired you. I've paid you better than anybody else in the Midwest. And now you're contacting my booking agent to see if you can produce a show at the venue that I do a monthly show at. It's dirty. Anything to get a leg up sometimes people will try.
It it's crazy. And I grew up in Minneapolis. I live in South Dakota now. I feel like there has never been more of a Midwestern comedy scene, if you will, than there is now. Because when I was growing up, there was no comedians ever going to Minneapolis. It didn't happen.
Sure.
You'd be lucky if a bigger comedian in the mid 2000s, of which before Kreischer and Segura started coming around, there weren't many. After Carlin had passed away, I mean, in terms of Midwestern comedy tours, they were dead. I mean,
Yeah.
a local guy maybe, but anything national, you're screwed. I mean, they'd hit the coast and that was it.
Yep. Yep.
Because at that time, the Midwest did not sell. It just,
Yeah.
you didn't sell the building. And
No,
probably booking your own shows that if you're not going to make, 75% of the building, it's going to be a bad night.
for sure.
I mean,
And
you probably even have a higher number than that. That was just me guessing.
yeah, it's every time I book a venue, my goal is to sell it out. I don't care if it seats 110 or if it seats 350 or like this arena it seats 17, 1800. My goal is to fill it. Again, I have that. We're doing everything 100 miles an hour with my ass on fire. We're not having a good time. So this arena show in 2 weeks, will it be a success because we're doing it? Of course. But will it really be a success in my mind? Not until we sell 1,500 seats.
I have to imagine you're close because I was hearing the name Doc Peterson before I was involved with Loch 22. Not before, but like right around the time I guess you would have been coming up is when I and started to get big in the Midwest because we're both in the Midwest.
Sure.
And being in the business that I'm in, which is podcasting, I kind of have to keep up with what's going on in and around here. And I was like, the hell is this Doc Peterson? And it was just tiny little whispers at the time, and those gradually got louder, which
I appreciate it.
which I'm pretty sure would go along with like the trend of your career just going like this.
Sure. I mean, the first place that I started getting paid to perform at um, is a little bar that's like 4 blocks from my house. It's a cool little rum bar, high end leather chairs, lounge seating, a stage that's probably no bigger than 8 foot by 5 foot. Perfect for a stand up comedy show. Um, it held about 75 people, and I was just like a feature or an opener when I was there, but I would do 2 shows Friday night, 2 shows Saturday night, and both of them would be sold out both nights. Um, those expanded to the point where I was doing bars that sat about 150 to 200, and those were selling out. Then once a year, I did my end of the year show at the Bourbon Theater in Lincoln, which for a seated show holds about 320, 330, something like that. And we sold those out both years. And that's where this arena idea came from. I said, it's just the logical next step. What's the next biggest venue that I can book and try to fill?
And again, 110 miles an hour with your ass on fire. I mean, just fits that. Have you
Wouldn't have it
always
any other way.
have you always had that mentality with your comedy? Is we're gonna do this 110 miles an hour, we're not gonna do it?
Pretty much. It's one of those things like I enjoy it, I have fun with it, but I don't put time into stuff that isn't going to be productive in my life. I just
Right.
don't. So if comedy was going to be productive, whatever that meant, then I needed to do it and do it hard.
And you are like an actual doctor for your day job. You're a
I am really a
chiropractor.
chiropractor. Yep. So Monday through Friday, I'm still doing the 8:30 to 5 thing. I do take off days when I have to travel, and I have 3 kids that do athletics, so I'm always taking off for that too. But yeah, Monday through Friday, I'm in the office treating patients.
I would I think a lot of people, if they did what you're doing, would legitimately go crazy. So it's a testament to you that you're still in this, not losing your mind, not pulling your hair out and throwing it at people. Uh,
That's subjective. I'm probably still losing my mind.
I mean, okay, to be fair, to be, I don't think you can sell out an arena and be an objectively, completely, all the way put together person.
Not at all. You
I
got to
don't
be a
think,
little bit.
I think you got to be a little bit off the rocker to do it. And then to pull it off and not do it the normal way, although the way you're doing it, like you're promoting the show, that is so normal for everything not comedy. The comedy is so weird because they've dug themselves into this mindset of we can't promote anything. And I feel like it's held the comedy business up for 30 years.
That's one of the things that I talk to with everyone. So the way that I got into doing my own shows, promoting my own shows, and building that was I took my background and my history of doing some charity events that I had done over the years, and I went, okay, these things worked for a big group event, and I applied them to every comedy show that I independently produced. I started a charity motorcycle ride down in Kansas City when I was in grad school as an affiliation with the chiropractic college down there, and it went from 30 people riding with us the first year to when I turned it over and graduated, I turned it over to an entire committee, and we had to have police escorts in and out of the city. We were donating $15,000 a year to the spina bifida hospital at KU Med Center, and we we learned along the way, like, hey, if we make t-shirts, people will buy t-shirts, and that just adds to our end of the year fund that we can give to the charity. If we sell food, we can also mark it up and do these things and make money and give it to the charity. So everything that we did, from crowd control to security to just getting people to sign up or finding the event and being a part of it, fundraising in any way, shape, or form, I just took and applied to the comedy world. Um, I've done charity hockey tournaments. My kid's a hockey player, and we took over a hockey tournament in Lincoln, Nebraska, and the same thing. They were losing money on it, and by the time my wife and I took it over and started running it like a business and promoting it and bringing teams in from all across the country and getting them to buy hats and T-shirts and all kinds of swag to support it, it was a moneymaker, and a huge moneymaker for the organization. And so I took all those business ideas and made them comedy show ideas as well.
Well, a lot of these charity organizations that run their charity like it's not a business, and there's a lot of them, and there's big ones that do it. It's like, okay, yes, you're a charity. You donate the majority of the money, but you still have to make the money.
Yep.
And you hear about these charities that go out of business, and you're like, what did you do? What did
You
you
know, and
do?
I when I talk to comedians about promoting their events or promoting the events that they're on my shows, the thing that I keep saying, and it applies across the board, whether it's a comedy show, a rock show, a charity fundraiser, if you're doing it and people don't come because of you, then you have no value. You may be the funniest damn comedian that I have ever heard in my life. But if you don't know how to get people to the show, asses in the seats, tickets sold, then you bring zero value to my show. Zero. So, and why would I hire you again? Again, you may be the funniest damn comedian that I have ever heard, but unless you can get people to make a formidable action, buying a ticket and actually showing up, you have zero value to me.
And, that's kind of the same with how pro wrestling used to work. If you don't know how to put people's asses in the seats, see ya.
Yeah.
Or at best, you were going to be working the opening match getting pinned. I mean,
Yeah.
if you can't cut a promo, for lack of a better term, and get people out here, I don't care if you're the funniest motherfucker here.
Right. I
And
agree.
yes, that's cutthroat. But the comedy business as a entire industry has been losing money for how long?
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
I've lost money on a show. Knock on wood, knock on something here. Um, I've never produced a show that lost money. And that's because we get butts in the seats.
well, and I'm sure as a comedian like you are, where it sounds like you're self-funding a lot of it, at least in a majority of places, you can't
Yeah.
really afford to lose the money. You lose the
No,
money,
and
you're screwed.
there's a lot of local comedians in the Midwest. It's funny that you brought up the Midwest and the culture of comedians and all that, because, and you could call me a hobbyist, and it doesn't hurt my feelings like some people, if you called them a hobbyist, they would just spontaneously combust and start crying and throwing a big ass fit. There's a lot of us, full time or hobbyists, whatever you want to call us, that aren't actually making money at doing this. They're losing their ass. They're paying their own gas to drive down to Kansas City to perform for a half hour, getting their own meals, getting their own drinks, probably getting their own hotel, or at least their gas to drive all the way back to Omaha the same night and maybe making $100. Well, that doesn't cover your expenses. That not even close. So to me, it's all got to be worth it. You call me and you want me to perform on a Saturday night in Council Bluffs, you gotta pay me enough to drive up there and back, and compensate me for the fact that I'm spending time away from my wife and my kids and my family and everything else. And so I try to talk to people all the time, say, make the venue understand that you have a value, and then hold yourself to that value. Because this crap of $35 and a cheeseburger to do a show on Saturday night's got to go.
I mean, the wrestling business has been the same way though. It was
Sure.
the old joke is $10 and a hot dog, kid.
Yeah. Oh, we shit. It's a cheeseburger and a beer, and if you're lucky, you might get $35 at the end of the night at a lot of these places. And when I produce a show, the lowest paid person on my show makes at least $100.
I mean,
That's the lowest.
a cheeseburger and a beer isn't bad for a guy who lives half a mile from the bar, who's there every night anyway, and doesn't expect to make any money and is doing this as a joke to him and his couple of his stupid buddies who he lost a bet to.
Right.
That's not bad. But if you're trying to do this and you're trying to do this as a business, a cheeseburger and a beer is like the biggest smack in the face I can think of.
I agree. And I've told other comics that do bookings that I said, I'm sorry, I won't do the show because that's if we're doing this as a business, then that's not fruitful for me. That doesn't pay anything. It doesn't even pay my gas. Otherwise, you're just doing this as a fun hobby, and which it is. It still can be. It can still be a fun hobby, and you can still make money.
It
But
can
we
be
got
an
to raise the
expensive
bar.
hobby.
Yeah, and a lot of the people in the Midwest, that's what they're doing. They're self-funding, like you said, they're self-funding their adventure. And you can hear all the people go, well, it's for exposure and I'm building something, and one day all the money that I've poured into it will come back. But it doesn't work that way. You can pour money into this shit for 10 years and you'll still have nothing at the end of it. You got to make your own opportunity.
I mean, I've listened to interviews with Bert Kreischer, and he was broke for what was it, the first 9 years?
Yeah.
I mean, the guy was broke and almost quit. And then something flipped. Everybody thinks he just shot straight up and became this shirtless guy who talks about being a machine. That guy worked his ass off for 10 years and then started taking his shirt off and throwing it around. I mean, people don't realize, especially now, I would argue it is harder to be a comedian now than it ever was because there's this culture inside comedy, and I'm sure you've heard it. Oh, it's not okay to promote your shows on social media. Oh, you shouldn't do that. That's against comedy rules. And if I was a comedian to that, I would say, who gives a shit?
And I definitely have. Um, the social norms and all of that. It's kind of like, and when you go to school to be an MD or a surgeon, and they say, "Oh, you got to be on call for 48 hours straight, and you're not going to sleep, and you're not going to see your family, and you're not going to," and then you perform a shitty surgery, and maybe somebody doesn't die, but you don't have a favorable outcome because you're on hour 46 of a 48-hour stretch just because your superiors did it for the last 10 years and their superiors before them did it. And why? Why not change it to a shorter shift so that we get better care and better surgery and better outcomes? And I look at comedy that way. Like, why grind it out at an open mic every single night of the week, 5 nights a week at shitty dive bars with the same 10 comics that are telling the same 10 shitty jokes? Why? Why not do something different?
And 9 of those jokes aren't funny.
Yeah, they suck. They
I mean,
do.
there's one funny
Uh,
one in there, and it's not even really funny. It's just kind of
and they've been doing it for a long time. So if you've ever gone to that open mic, you've already heard that joke so many times that it's not funny anymore. And that's something that I get shit on locally about, is that I have a bad attitude about open mics. I I don't do very many open mics. I have a full studio in my basement. I have a small PA. I have lights. I have sound. All of that stuff. So when I practice, I set it up just like I would a stage. I put my backdrop up. I have my mic, my PA, a monitor, lights, and I'll go through my entire set, start to finish. And I'll run different scenarios through my head about what happens if they don't like it, or if they're not laughing, or if they react this way to a joke versus that way to a joke. And you can't always replicate that without a live crowd, but an open mic crowd is 10 other drunk comics that aren't really listening to your set anyway. It's just going to be crickets anyway. So I'm not a huge fan of open mics. And when I do an open mic, I'll call the host ahead of time, let them know I'm coming, ask if I can go early. I'll do my set and I'll leave. That's it. I was just there to get a different environment, to perform my set and get out. That's it.
I mean,
Um,
I think open mics are what has bred this culture of you can't promote anything anytime, anywhere. Because, and that's why a lot of old comedians don't like Bert Kreischer, because he's not afraid to promote the shit out of whatever he's doing.
yeah.
And if you noticed, a lot of these older comedians are like, Bert Kreischer's an idiot and he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about.
Well,
I mean,
hard to argue when he goes to the bank and writes those big fat checks, right?
hard to argue when this guy's selling out freaking stadiums. Okay, like let's calm down. This guy's selling more tickets than you've ever known how to. So everybody calm down. Let's maybe not call this guy an idiot when he's selling out baseball stadiums. I mean,
Yeah, he was just here. He did his latest Netflix special in Omaha at the Orpheum, and that was sold out for, God, I don't know, like 4 or 5 shows. And then he is doing the tour currently with, I don't know, 10 other comedians that just came through Lincoln and did Pinnacle Bank Arena, which seats 12, 14,000 people, and it was full. So argue
which
with that.
15 years ago, by the way, would not have happened.
No,
No chance in hell.
no.
That thing
The only,
happening in Nebraska doesn't happen in Nebraska.
hell no,
I
not
mean,
even close.
10 years ago, I would argue that probably doesn't happen.
No. The only one that's ever come through that I can even think of was Jeff Dunham with the ventriloquist with the puppets. And that had a slightly larger appeal because his jokes, even though he has some adult oriented jokes, you could let your 14-year-old, your 10-year-old listen to him and they'd probably miss the innuendos and the adults would get it and the kids would just think it's a funny puppet on his ass or on his hand.
His
So,
ass, his hand, what's the difference?
yeah, well, hand up his ass, you know what I meant.
I,
But yeah, so you don't see that. And still today, there's not a lot of comics coming through Pinnacle Bank Arena. I'd be hard pressed to name another one that's come through that's done anything like that.
I mean, Minneapolis now gets a lot of the comics that go through, the Target Center or the XL Energy Center. But like I said, again, 10 years ago, that was not a
Mm-hmm.
thing. I mean, I'm sure you look at it like the trend in the Midwest is comedy is up and everything else is kind of at another level as well. I mean, concerts in the Midwest are selling better than they ever have before. That's just a statistical fact.
It is, but at the same time, we're seeing less and less music venues. So
Which,
like in it's crazy to think about, but in Lincoln, which is a college town, University of Nebraska is here in Lincoln. We have less live music venues than we've ever had.
which is like the exact opposite of what you would expect in a college town. You would expect
Exactly.
live music bars, kind of more rowdy because it is college, right? It's going to be a
Yeah.
little, it's going to be a little bit on the alcohol side of things. And if you don't like to drink, well, you're going to have a bad time in the college town. Trust me, I lived in one for 2 years. I lived in Fargo, North Dakota for 2 years. If you didn't drink in that town, you didn't exist.
You didn't fit in.
It,
But that's North Dakota anyway, isn't it?
I mean, for the most part, I mean, have you been to South Dakota? Like it's the same way.
Yeah, my son plays hockey, so we spend a lot of time in South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota. We're all over the place.
I'm sure you figured out that in the Dakotas, if you don't drink, you are a weirdo. I
Pretty
mean,
much, you're the outcast.
and it's only in the Dakotas because if you don't drink in Minnesota, unless it's like rural Minnesota, you're fine. Though there are parts of Minnesota that are just like the Dakotas, where if you like Moorhead, I don't know if you've ever been to Moorhead.
Oh yeah,
If you don't drink in that town, you're crazier than an outhouse rat. I mean,
yeah.
let's go back to comedy. Let's
All
kind
right.
of go back on your career timeline here. So it only took you 3 years to get here. So we don't have very far to go. But was there an event or a moment, maybe a show you did where you realized, holy shit, this thing's going in a direction that I never saw it going?
Actually, that happened in the first 6 months of comedy. Um, I knew a guy out in Grand Island, Nebraska, who owned my oldest daughter is big into softball. She's played with some national teams and all over the place. He owned an indoor batting cage and training facility, and he wanted to do a fundraiser so that the girls in his region could use that facility cheaper. And I went, he came to me and he's like, "Hey, you're doing this comedy thing now. Why don't you bring a comedy show out? We'll do it inside the batting cage, inside the training facility, and it'll be a fundraiser." And I'm like, dude, I'm 6 months into this thing. I don't know the first thing about producing a show or anything like that. And he goes, "Don't worry about it. I'll rent tables and chairs. I'll get a bar. I'll get a liquor license. All you have to do is bring 5 funny dudes and do a comedy show." So I agreed. We agreed on a budget. I hired at that time, I knew like 6 comics. So I just called all 6 of them and said, "Hey, we're going to go do this show, and here's the budget, and here's how much we're going to pay you." Um, I was going to host the show because, again, I was the newest guy out of all of those people who were going to be there. So I was just going to be the host. A week and a half before the show, the guy that I hired to be the headliner decided he was not going to headline the show, but he wanted to be paid the same as the headliner, and he wanted to host the show because he thought he was that damn important to the show. And I said, "What the hell am I going to do here? I don't have more money to hire anybody else." And he goes, "You headline it. You've written about 30 minutes worth of material now. That's long enough to do a headlining set. You do it." And I did. I showed up that night on a week and a half's notice, and I ended up closing out the show. And I went, "Holy shit, this could be a thing." And that was one of the last times I worked with that guy. He was a promoter in Lincoln. He was as sleazy as they come, and he screwed me out of a lot of money afterwards with one more show that we did together. And even that night, he got drunk on stage. He started hitting on women from the stage, and he even hit on the venue owner's widowed mother and was trying to take this 60-year-old mom home. And I had to call the next day and apologize to him. And he's like, "I love the show. I love everything about it, but you can never have that guy back if I have you back out here because he's a piece of shit." And I'm like, done. So I had one more show contracted with him. He shorted me money on the last night. And I was like, you know what? I'm washing my hands. So those two events together made me go, I can do this. And I don't need to rely on some other sleazebag, douchebag to get me to this point. I'm good. I got this.
And you being in the medical field, I'm sure you're like the exact opposite of a sleazebag. You just have to kind of keep your hands clean because
You got to watch yourself. I mean, in this world, there's so many things out there when the stories that you hear about uh, comics making female comics do shit to get on time, get on stage and get stage time. And now you got to be way above board to even think about making it.
you know what I don't understand about that whole female comics thing because I hear a lot about it. My thing is, if you're funny and you can put butts in the seats, who gives a shit what gender you are?
And that's my feeling. I hire people from all races. I hire males. I hire females. I don't care if you're gay or straight. I won't ever seek you out because you are one thing or another. I don't like shows like that. I don't like all female shows or all male shows, or and when they promote them as such. Like if it just happens, then well, geez, I did a show when it was four females. Well, great, cool. But when they try to shove it down your throat as something special, as this is an all gay show, all white show, all black show, all whatever, that doesn't work for me either. I want variety because I don't want one note from the beginning to the end. I don't know how or why you would even try to put a show together like that.
It's because comedy historically, and you know this probably better than me, comedy historically has been the middle-aged white guy, and that's
Yeah,
been it. I mean, there are exceptions, right? There are obvious exceptions to that.
sure.
But traditionally, going back as far as you can go with stand-up, who has it been that has dominated the industry?
Sure.
Middle-aged white guys from the Northeast, generally speaking.
Right.
And I don't know why it always catered to the Northeast. It just happened that way. But that's what happened. And then it became like anything else. It became a boys' club. And then they started to, do the racism and sexism stuff that every other industry's been doing for 100 years. And now comedy's maybe starting to wake up. Maybe. I'm sure you
Maybe.
I'm sure you still see guys that are less funny than some of the female comedians up there that don't deserve the microphone they're holding, much less the stage they're on. And you're just like, how did you get booked? Who are you and how did you get booked?
I used to drag my wife to independent comedy shows that were produced around here. And it was all about scouting out who I might want to have on a show. And I don't headline every show that I produce, not even close. I probably headline 25% of the shows that I produce. I'm always looking for somebody that can carry it for 30 minutes or 40 minutes or whatever. But I used to drag my wife around to these independent shows and we'd sit in the audience and just go, oh my God, why is this person even on stage? This hurts. This is the worst shit I've ever been tortured with. So I've expanded now because I'm not just looking for people within a 25-minute driving range. I use a lot of different social media apps and things like that to solicit comedians to send me video, to send me their credits and things like that. And so I've been lucky. I've hired comedians from both coasts, um, from Jesus, New Jersey to LA, from New Orleans, Nevada. I mean, you name it. They're coming from all over to be a part of the Doc Peterson comedy shows.
I I have to confess to you, and you're probably going to find this funny. At 24 years old, I've still never been to a comedy show.
What are you waiting for?
I've thought about it a couple of times, but the thing I've noticed with live events, especially since the pandemic, is everything is like triple what it used to be.
Well, that's no shit.
I mean, I don't know if you noticed this, but the second we came out of the pandemic and had crowds again for anything, it was triple the price. And it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what it was. Now, has some of that normalized? Yes. But look at the NFL tickets. They're still through the roof. Major League Baseball, the reason their attendance was down in 2021, they complained about it, but the reason their attendance was down is because they upped the tickets so much. Now, is their attendance back up for the most part? Yes.
I just went to a Royals game this weekend with my family, and the concessions are where they're killing you because the Royals suck. I mean, let's say it. I
I'm a
they
Twins
suck.
fan. So the Twins suck too. We're in first place. We suck.
We're in last place, and we really suck. But we went on like SeatGeek or something last minute and got what we thought were cheap tickets. They were like $15 a piece. Well, then they added like $10 in ticket fees on top of that bullshit. The ticket fees were almost as much as the ticket themselves, and then concessions and shit like that. Holy crap! That was an expensive day.
Yeah, and I, when I talk to my friends about the live event business, I'm always like, do you realize how A, mega profitable, and B, dirty that business has to be for Major League Baseball, who statistically is on the decline, to charge the absurd prices they are charging, not just for tickets in certain cases, but concessions alone.
Yeah.
And I shit on Major League Soccer all the time. I'm a soccer fan, and I shit on Major League Soccer all the time for some of the dumb shit that they do, but they do keep their prices affordable in both the concessions and the tickets. So at least they try, but they're still idiots. Don't get me wrong. There's 15 other things they do that make that thing look like it means nothing because they're still stupid. But at least they're trying. It's like all these other sports leagues are just like, fuck the
They don't
consumer.
they don't even have the illusion that they're trying not to get in your pocket.
No,
They don't even try to pretend.
no, at least MLS is young enough to the point where they're still trying to pretend like they're not trying to steal your money.
And I'm not a soccer guy, but I mean, if I wanted to watch friends try to score for 90 minutes, I'd go to the bar on Friday night. And at least with hockey, there's a fight or something, and nobody's crying about getting kicked in the shin or whatever. But
I mean, nobody
anyway,
might score for 60 minutes, but yeah.
uh, but yeah, I mean, soccer at least understands as a whole, and this is not my bias against soccer, but that it has not caught on in the United States as a huge spectator, income driven, TV driven, sponsorship driven thing. Is it going that way? I'm sure it is, despite my best efforts to keep it down. But um, they're not screwing the consumer totally yet.
Will they? Yes.
Oh yeah,
Look at look at Europe. The Premier League is screwing the customer the same way the NFL does here. It
yeah,
is it will inevitably happen. And if anybody has the delusion of grandeur that if MLS ever takes off over here, they're not going to do that, get your head out of your ass.
yep, yeah,
Because any of these live event businesses, the second they get big around the country, their objective is one thing: take your money for as little as possible.
yep. And I've seen that even in my shows where a perfect example. I did a show at a local bar here in Lincoln, and the first year I did the show there, it's a separate venue from the actual bar. So it's a side room that they don't ever use unless there's a special event booked in it. I had to provide my own lights, my own sound guy, but I got to use the room for free with the contingency that I would sell it out. It held 130 people. And of course, we sold it out. I got zero cut of alcohol sales or anything like that. So it was just a straight free trade. You fill it, we'll make all the money off of alcohol sales. Um, we did, and afterwards, bartenders and waitresses that I didn't personally know before the show connected with me on social media, and they're like, "We made more money on that night than we did on the previous 3 Fridays combined, or 3 Saturdays combined. It was a great night. Thanks. We hope to do it again." So the following year, I went back to the venue and I said, "Hey, this is the deal I got last time. Are we good with that?" And he said, "No, you got to pay $250 to rent the room." Now, which is still a very low cost. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't balking at that. What I was looking at was, okay, for the 250, what are you going to provide me that you didn't last time? What do I get out of the deal? Are you going to provide me a sound guy? Are you going to come and do the lights and the sound and do all that? And no, they weren't. So that just speaks to your point about the live venue and the live industry. Everybody's looking to gouge. They were perfectly happy with the year before when they just made a shit ton on alcohol sales and food sales because they serve food there too. So we opened the doors at 6. The show didn't start till 8, and it was general admission seating. So everyone came early and ate and drank, and they were there for hours. They were perfectly happy with that the first time, but then they saw the writing on the wall that there could be even more money to be made, and they wanted to gouge.
And it's the live event business, dude. It's what it
Yeah,
is. I don't understand this business. I don't understand the people in it that don't understand the fact that, well, it's a business, you also have a customer that if they're not happy, they will not go.
Yeah.
And I think, especially in the Midwest now, a lot of these Midwestern sports teams are going to have to figure out these people aren't going to go if you don't fix your shit. Because I don't know if you've noticed this, but the average Midwesterner is becoming a little more picky with what they do with their money.
Oh, sure.
And I'm sure that's everybody, not just in America. I'm sure that's everywhere. But I notice it more in the Midwest because that's where I am. I'm wondering if there's not going to be a crossroads that they come to where they're like, guys, did we inflate prices too much because we can't get butts in seats anymore?
I think you're going to see more of the promo nights where it's like dollar hot dogs or throwback pricing to the last time that team won any significant amount of games or something. I've already seen that a handful of times. It used to be like one time a year they do dollar dogs and dollar Pepsis. Now they're doing that shit more often because that draws more people in. And so I think you're already seeing it. I think at some point though, you're absolutely right. There's going to come a crossroads where they're like, okay, people are no longer going to pay $15 for a 20-ounce beer.
Okay, I've talked about this on other platforms, but this NFL Thursday night flex thing is a total FU to the fans.
Yeah.
I mean, the NFL just gave up all illusions that they gave a fuck. They
Yep.
they just said, fuck it, we are not going to pretend like we care anymore. Which you already knew they didn't care. It's the NFL. I
They're
mean,
making their money.
are they a dirty business? Damn straight they are. And you want to know the funny part? They're not even trying to hide it anymore.
No.
And I'm sure it's like sleazebag comedian guys that you've worked with that they tried to hide it at first. And then at some point, you just saw right through it and they stopped trying to hide it. They are a sleazeball.
Well, in our business, it's not as hard to see all the steps. Like if I went to the that awesome little bar that's right up the street from me that I started comedy in, and I said, "Hey, I want to do a comedy show here," he would flat out tell me, "Hey, this is what I charge to do lights and sound, or for the stage, or if you're going to sell tickets, then I get this cut." So everybody knows that. And like that first sleazy promoter I worked with, um, it wasn't hard for us to figure out that he was making 3 grand a weekend and paying other comics a total of $500. Like, holy shit, you're just promoting it. You're not even doing anything significant. You're making money off of everybody else. Yeah. So the NFL at least has uh, a few more hidden ways that they make money and hidden expenses that you don't see. But in the smaller scale around here, yeah, we see right through all the sleaze real, real fast.
And I think that's Nebraska kind of being a Midwestern state. And Nebraska is very much that old fashioned Midwestern state. I mean,
Sure.
Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin to a lesser extent now, because I think Nebraska or Wisconsin has gone a little too far towards the, I don't want to say they've gone too far towards the we are trying to be East Coast gimmick, but it kind of feels like they have.
Sure.
Does it not feel, I'm sure you've been to Wisconsin, does it not feel like that place is trying to be the East Coast sometimes?
Yeah. Especially in their bigger cities.
Like they are trying so hard to be on the East Coast. It's like, guys, you're not, you're not moving, guys. You can't move a
You're
state.
stuck. No, you're stuck.
And Wisconsin, I think, has been rated one of the worst states in the Midwest forever. I mean, when you're below Michigan, you're really hurting. So
For sure.
it's crazy to me. I just I don't get it. And I think part of Wisconsin's problem is the fact that they have openly admitted to not knowing what they're doing a couple of times when it comes to anything.
Yeah.
And the Wisconsin comedy business, I don't know if you know any comedians in Wisconsin. It's dead out there.
I don't know anybody out there and I haven't connected with anybody out there, and there's probably a reason for it because there's nothing out there.
It sometimes it's not an accident that you don't connect with people. Sometimes it's just a sign of, maybe I shouldn't try to sell tickets there.
Yeah.
Bit of a comedic question for you. Is there a sketchy place you've worked as a comedian where you're like, I'm not sure I'm going to make it out of here?
Whew. I can't think of one particular area that I've been hired to perform in that I was like, eh. Um, there are places that I won't go back to. There are places that are insanely popular with the local tight knit klitsch group that are around here that I was like, okay, I did it once. I don't need to do it again. Um, but that's the beauty of being your own promoter, own producer, and not just relying on other people to book you 100% of the time. Is I can look at a venue and go, nope, not happening, not interested. The thing that I have that a lot of comedians don't is that I know exactly who my demographic is. And that comes from running those charity events, the motorcycle events, the hockey events, and it comes from being a chiropractor. We know through statistics that were not compiled by me, that across the industry in healthcare across the United States, that patients of chiropractors are between 30 and 65. They are usually either women or married couples or people that have been married and divorced. They have kids. They both work outside the home. We know all these demographics about them. Consequently, that's who comes and buys tickets to a Doc Peterson comedy show is people over 30, probably under 65. They've got some life experience. And that relates to the storytelling that I do on stage because I'm speaking from experience. Everything I say on stage happened in some form or fashion in real life. It's not made up bullshit. This is my life that I'm telling on stage. And those people have enough experience in life to relate to the things that are coming out of my mouth. So I'm not a guy that hires a bunch of comics that are 24. They're just not going to work. You can't do 30 minutes of jokes about a cat's butthole and expect a 40-year-old soccer mom to think that's funny.
It doesn't
It's
fit
not
your
going to happen.
demographic.
It doesn't fit the demographic.
Now in
So,
Fargo, where it's mostly young people, would that maybe sell? Yes, but you're probably not going to go to Fargo because that is a much younger leaning audience. Period.
and I would exactly. So I wouldn't book myself in a venue that build themselves as a college town venue because I wouldn't do well there. My brand of comedy does not fit with a 24-year-old college kid. Could I steer it that way? Probably, but it wouldn't be as good as my regular show. So I tend to book high, getting back to your original questions, I booked myself at what I would call high end venues. I book myself at venues that have professional lights and sound and a sound person and a light person. I book myself at venues that have huge screens either behind us or on the walls that can put our headshots up or a video before the show starts or during the show. I don't typically book myself at really low end sketchy venues that I'm afraid that I'm going to have to watch my wallet and hope that my car wasn't broken into on while I was on stage.
But you hear that from comedians all the time, right? Is that they performed at these sketchy venues. Going back to what you were talking about how your comedy has a demographic. I appreciate the fact that you see that because so many comedians and so many, like, I know my podcast audience has a demographic. My demographic is 21 to 36, maybe early to mid 40s, right? It's that 21 to, let's just say 48 range, what they call prime real estate and television, because I'm 24, and I'm a 24-year-old who has something to talk about, unlike some of these 24-year-olds you see on TikTok dancing around and showing their ass. I'm not trying to shit on anybody here. I'm really not. But you know what the average 24-year-old does on TikTok. I'm not telling you something you don't know. It's out there. You can find it. But I've found that so many comedians, so many podcasters now, so many people that work in the media and live event industry don't understand what their demographic is. They don't understand that they're catering to an audience. They just think, oh, I'm out here to do my show and be a goofball, and who cares? Who cares? You understand, okay, I have a demographic 30 to less than 60. That's my target. That's what I got to hit. And that's who's going to buy the
Exactly.
tickets.
So to that point, I tried to hire some younger comics as I got some contracts to do a monthly show in Omaha and a couple of different monthly shows across the Midwest. And before I started expanding my search to outside that 45-minute drive time range and finding comics from all over the place, I was kind of, I don't want to say scraping the bottom of the barrel because I don't want to put them down quite that bad, but I had gone through all the local comics that I thought were worth a shit, to worth paying to be on stage. And so I started hiring a couple of these young kids, and I call them kids. They're 24. They're college kids, right? Um, they bombed on my stages because, say, one of the venues that I produce at in Omaha is called Barrel and Vine. It's a high end venue, just like the name would imply. You've got wine drinkers and you've got people that aren't afraid to spend $35 or $45 on a steak. I know that's Midwest price. So if anybody's listening on one of the coasts, they're like $45, let's go. No, a
$45
nice
will be in
meal.
the car.
Yeah, but a nice meal. It has great lighting. It has an ambiance to it. All the chairs are big leatherback chairs. They've got a $500,000 lighting and sound package for this stage. It's gorgeous. So the people that attend this place and know that it exists are not people who are going to listen to lowbrow jokes. They're not going to listen to a college kid bitch and piss and moan about dorm life necessarily. Um, and when they tried to raise the bar on their material and try to cater to the older crowd, which one of the comedians did, he failed so miserably. It was the first time ever in comedy that I wanted to pull him off stage. Like I'm standing on the side of the stage looking at my watch going, all right, dude, I told you 12 minutes, but it's 9. Get the fuck off. It was that bad. So I've learned and I've seen it firsthand that you have to hire the right comics for the right demographic.
And it's not even that you don't want those kids to succeed. It's that,
That's just not the venue for them.
and I'm sure at a college town venue that seats, 200 to 300 people, they'd have probably done really well.
In fact, I've seen that. I've seen that particular comic. He's off in college now in another state, and he's producing some shows, and he's had some decent turnouts. But it was at a like a brewery tap room type place where the crowd was that I'm going to drink a craft beer and we're going to talk about the hops and the oatmeal and the blueberry and the oatmeal cream pie that we dunk in our beer and all that weird shit that I'm just not into. And they didn't care about the lights. They didn't care about the sound. They didn't care about the production of it. They just stood up there with a microphone and a shitty karaoke machine and told 24-year-old jokes to other 24-year-olds. And they did fine. They had 100 people in there. But as far as taking it to the next level, they weren't there.
I think comedy has kind of advanced past the college humor. I think we're through it now. 15 years ago, that 24-year-old kid probably would have gotten over big just about anywhere because everybody thought college humor was funny 15 years ago. It's just not that anymore. Comedy's changed. It's gone to the, I don't like calling it this, but he's the one who popularized it, the Bert Kreischer style, like the storytelling, life experience stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I'm 24, but I think your stuff's really funny. I'm not your target audience at all, but I think you're funny as hell.
Appreciate it.
My favorite story of yours that I found when I was scrolling through your TikTok a couple days ago was the one where you came home and smoked a little weed, and your son has a I know who just smoked weed meter.
He does. God damn it. So, yes, my son has the uncanny ability to find anybody in the room who has recently smoked pot and fuck with them without really truly knowing that that person smoked pot. He just instinctively knows, hey, that's the person I'm going to fuck with today. That's my kid.
And when you get to the backwards spider walk part, I just break. I'm just like,
All of that shit was real. I was sitting on the chair. I'm watching TV with my wife and daughters. He comes out of his bedroom into the hallway, which I'm the only one that can see down that hall. He's wearing his whitey tighties and this Halloween mask with like ram's head with giant horns on it. And he just lets out this pterodactyl scream. It wasn't a goat, it wasn't a ram, it was like Jurassic Park. And he gets down on all fours like some backwards crab, starts walking around in the on the hallway. I'm dying, but no one knows why I'm laughing. No one else can see this shit except for me. They think I'm hallucinating. And then he just gets up, goes back into his room, shuts the door like nothing happened.
which you probably think you're hallucinating too.
I was high enough that I was holding onto the couch. Like, what the hell?
I love the part where you were like, I go into the living room and my wife and daughter are watching the women channel for females with vaginas or whatever the fuck it's called.
All women for women by women vagina channel or whatever the fuck that is.
Again, I'm not your target demographic, but there's shit you say where I'm like, okay, that's funny. I
I haven't done that story on stage in a long time. I'm going to have to bring that one back.
I don't know why, but I just thought it was really funny.
But
And
that's a perfect example of real life. And of course, when I do that in the stage show, it's long and drawn out, and I give all the background and the details behind it. But that that shit really happened to me. That wasn't something I made up. My brain isn't that good to make a story like that up. That really happened upstairs in my living room.
and was it terrifying in the moment? Yes.
Yeah.
And did your dog talk to you? Absolutely. And he was like, are you good? Do you need assistance?
You mean to call 911? Like, yeah, I might need to call 911. There's a demon crab thing over there walking through the hallway in its underwear.
That kind of looks like my kid, but we're not going to acknowledge that part. We're not going to talk about that part.
That kid will ruin your day. God, you cannot be high around that kid. He will ruin your day.
Does he ruin your day while sober, or can you kind of just expect it?
By sober, you just never know what's going to come out of his mouth. And like we were at the Royals game Saturday, and he got the ice cream in the little baseball hat, and he's chowing down. He disappears. He goes to the bathroom. 5 minutes later, he comes out, and he's wearing this little thing on the back of his head like a yarmulke. And he's like, look at me, look at. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? People are staring. And he's like, yeah, I know. It's great, isn't it? Yeah, that's my life.
I feel like, and you can tell me if this is wrong, and I know we're running out of time. To be a comedian of the style you do, you have to have almost no filter, if any at all.
You can't filter. So I have written outlines of everything that's happened that I think is funny in my life, and I'll ask my wife, or hell, I'll even talk to my kids and go, "Hey, tell me something that was funny," and and then you can expand on a story like that. But the stuff I've told about my wife on stage would get most guys divorced.
Oh
And
yeah, I've seen it.
my wife goes along with it. She's like, you know what? That really happened. She's been around me long enough. She knows that something like that happens in real life. I'm going to tell it on stage, or I'm
The
going to
one
tell it at
about
a
the show
party.
in Vegas was particularly,
Christmas tree cakes.
yeah, Christmas tree cakes was particularly 90% of guys, if they did what you did that night, you're in divorce court the next week.
So Christmas tree cakes went viral. As viral as anything that I've ever done has gone. And I had Hertz Donuts from Springfield, Missouri, like an 8 hour drive from me, connect to me on social media and go, hey, the Hertz Donuts in Lincoln is making you Christmas tree cake donuts. Go get one. I'm like, are you fucking serious? They're like, yeah, yeah. So I made a video of me going in and them giving me donuts. And but the Christmas tree cakes, that's a good one. I like that one.
That's a most guys get divorced after that.
Yeah, yeah. But again, it really happened. We were all there for it, and I just happened to have the balls to say it on stage.
Your wife must be a very patient woman.
Patient. She's a champ. She So she goes to almost every single one of my shows. She helps me with merch and marketing and setup and tear down. And if I'm having a problem with a venue or anything like that, she is a champ. She takes care of all of that for me.
I think it's funny when you hear about these comedians who are like, or, maybe it's a friend who used to be a comedian that kind of failed for whatever reason. And they always say, oh, my significant other didn't support me. I feel like any successful comedian kind of needs that family support, whether the audience can see it or not.
And that's exactly what I was going to say is that you take somebody like Bert, right? His wife is extremely supportive of what he does. She's even got her own podcast just to support him. And she knows that he's going to say shit on stage and either blow it out of proportion or maybe add some details that weren't there in the original story that make it that much more funny. But she's a good sport about it. And my wife's an absolutely awesome sport about everything that's come out of my mouth. But she supports Bert more than anyone could ever imagine. He might say some stupid shit about her on stage, but at the end of the day, she's his rock. And that's the way I feel about my wife. She's always there. She has never said, this is a bad idea, stop it. She's always said, if you're going to do it right. Do it with 100 miles an hour with your ass on fire.
And I don't think that the value of that for someone in your position can be underestimated.
Not at all.
And I know everybody's going to say, oh, that's so cheesy. No, that's just reality for,
That's real.
I mean, my family doesn't understand what the hell I'm doing with my life, talking into a microphone for a living. I'm going to go host a wedding in 2 weeks. And everybody's like, you're going all the way to Fargo to host a wedding? I'm like, yeah, they're paying me.
Exactly.
I mean, like, I'll host anything. And my mom thought it was so funny when I told her I was hosting a wedding. I texted her and I was like, so I'm hosting a wedding in like 2 weeks. And she said, you're doing what? And she calls me and she is belly laughing. She thinks it's so fun. I've been to one wedding in my life. That's why she thinks it's funny. She's like,
okay, so it's a little bit funny. I give you that.
I didn't think it was that funny, but she thought it was just the funniest thing she's ever heard in her life.
My parents thought that I was just crazy. They did not understand what the hell I was doing when I started doing comedy. And they didn't even attend a show for like the first year and a half, 2 years. And then they finally came to a show and they saw it. It was sold out. There were 220 some people packed into this bar. And they're like, okay, I get it. I get the allure. I get what you're doing here. But
he may still be crazy, but
yeah, that first 2 years, if I called my mom on a Saturday night and told her about a show, she would change the subject and be like, "Yeah, your dad had gout last weekend and he had to go to the doctor." The fuck? I just told you about this awesome. Yeah,
your dad ran himself over with the lawnmower again.
yeah, yeah. We got a new heart medication we're really doing good on.
Oh, we started this new diet for people,
So they get it now, but they didn't always get it.
Doc, it has been so awesome talking to you, man.
Appreciate it, man.
Go check out, the link is in the description. Trust Me, I'm a Doctor, July 15th at the Icebox in Lincoln, Nebraska. I encourage you, if you're in the Lincoln area, to go. Doc is one funny motherfucker, and I don't think he'll mind me saying that. Forgive my French, but I don't think Doc's getting offended.
Not at all.
Trust Me, I'm a Doctor, July 15th. And you got a documentary coming out on Loch 22 as well.
Loch 22 Productions is putting out a documentary called Comedians. And I believe we are now in 6 or 8 episodes total.
Go check that out when it comes out right here on Loch 22. Funny enough, you're on the same channel that's going to be on.
There you go.
You didn't even know that before you got here. Now you do. You just showed up. Like, who's this random guy I'm going to be talking to on a Monday morning? Why am I doing this again?
All good. It's about that promotion, remember?
You get yourself over, brother. Anyway, folks, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're in the Lincoln area, go check out Trust Me, I'm a Doctor on July 15th at the Icebox. That is going to be an awesome show. I'm hoping that they take some video of it for the comedian's documentary because I want to see it. Everybody have a good day. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see you next Friday.